The Team VVV Awards 2018, sponsored by Ben Green Racing and Thrustmaster. Hello viewers, welcome to more coverage of the Team VVV Awards 2018. And today we're going to be discussing Best Indie Game. Of course, this is a week of all the big game awards this week until we get up to the main event, which is Racing Game of the Year. But of course, I'm joined today by Kevin.
Hello.
And Martin.
Hello.
Now, Best Indie Game is quite a hard-fought category. There's a lot of titles out there. You kind of need to sift between the good and the bad. And, you know, I think that people don't always appreciate how many indies are punching above their weight in terms of what they're actually putting out there, what they're actually up against. I think when you see an indie film made for a few £1,000s and Marvel Avengers, you recognize the budget on screen. I think with games, sometimes you don't always recognize what the games companies are achieving and what they're up against in terms of, you know, sometimes you have 4 guys doing the job of 400 guys in a bigger games company. But either way, the nominees this year have all done just that in terms of delivering something that looks and plays very well. So let's just go through then. We have a Redout Lightspeed Edition. We have Tiny Tracks, Baja Edge of Control HD, Urban Trial Freestyle 2, and Mantis Burn Racing. Now, firstly, Redout, obviously the PC version was released the year before, but then last year we had the console version released, which is what we're focusing on here, which combined a lot of the DLC and just an overall thoroughly improved package. First, before my thoughts, I'm just going to hand to Kevin. What are your thoughts on Redout?
Yeah, I mean, Redout was a major sort of surprise, wasn't it, from this developer that we haven't really heard of. And out they come with this amazing race, which, you know, in some respects probably outdoes Wipeout, a mega collection. You know, it has this amazing sense of speed, incredibly colourful and vibrant environments, a control system which was interesting because you have these sort of strafe buttons as well, which you can apply on top of your turning inputs just to give it a little bit more sort of speed around the corners, a little bit more tighter turn to attack the faster corners. So it was a nice game that sort of had a nice flow to it, and it sort of came out of nowhere, didn't it? And it was a game that you know, it really sort of, like you say, punched above its weight in terms of the visuals, the technical approach to it, and just the way it all comes together. This very smooth, very fast flowing game that is an awful lot of fun. It certainly is a strong contender here amongst all these games.
Martin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, similar thoughts really. I think it really innovates the genre, which I think is something we see a lot from indie games where there's less restrictions on creativity. Like I said, the control scheme, it demands so much skill from the player. I think that really sets it apart. And then when you combine that with the utterly dazzling visuals, it's a really unique racing game in a genre that's not had a lot of attention in recent years. I think for the console version, I think the performance issues did let it down somewhat, particularly on Xbox One, where of course it was limited to 30. And I think it's a bit choppy on PS4, the standard PS4 console that is. But they are still making improvements on it, so that's good. But I think too, it's just a shame it came out. I think it was about a month after Wipeout, a mega collection. I think if it didn't clash with Wipeout on PS4, it would have had a lot more attention. But definitely one of the more underrated racing games of this generation, I would say.
Yeah,
absolutely.
More recognition.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, you know, when I made a Redout video a couple of years ago, you'd have like lots of viewers on your Forza Horizon video. You make a Redout video, no one's interested. You say, why aren't you interested? Never heard of it. And I think the problem is a lot of viewers only watch videos of games they've heard of. They don't watch videos of games they haven't heard of. And I think it shows the weight of marketing budgets. What's so brilliant about Redout is the handling, that it's revolutionary in the twin stick control method. That's completely new. They've refreshed the handling system. It's very intuitive. It works very well indeed. The tracks and design and the artwork is inspired. Wonderful design, reflections, lighting, really amazing what they've managed to achieve there. The big weakness for me is in the personality of the actual ships themselves, the actual craft. They don't have the personality of, say, something like Wipeout, where you could see the world that they came from. This is all very abstract in its design. But one thing I do want to call out is the audio and music. Firstly, it has really great audio in the terms of the sound and the swooshing sounds and the wind from the ships themselves and the echoes and the voices. But above all, it has an amazing soundtrack. It has a soundtrack, the sort of stuff we haven't heard from, say, F-Zero GX. Real pumping music to it and orchestral themes. Stunning soundtrack. And in a way, it kind of made me sad just how few games have a great in-house soundtrack now. So I just wanted to make a call out on that. All round, the soundtrack, the graphics, the visuals, the optimizations, and Martin, you touched on there. They, as it happens, just before recording this, they've got a new update for Xbox to improve running there and lock the X version at 60 now as well. So I'm going to go and check that out.
It is a very well supported game, actually, isn't it?
Yeah.
The amount of updates they've released over time is insane, especially on the PC version.
Well, that was one of the reasons for its inclusion, because they when I played it last year, I realized the console versions are so heavily updated. They're different games. They've even retextured the various stages. I mean, nothing looks the same as it was in the original build, and in the original PC version. It really has been a big step forward there, and apparently it runs very well on the PS4 Pro as well. So lots of improvements to Redout. Certainly a very impressive title this year. Moving on to the next one that a lot of you may not know, Tiny Tracks on the PSVR. Kevin, you've been playing this a fair bit. Tell me your thoughts.
Yeah, I guess it was a nice surprise, wasn't it, to have a PSVR indie title, not something I would necessarily expect. And, it had a very sort of simple mechanic to it. You go, when you approach a corner, you have to drift around that corner. But not only do you have to do that, you have to drift at a certain angle. So there's that sort of challenge involved. If you didn't drift, you would sort of come to you slow to a halt around the turn. So it's something you had to do. You get the drift right, get the angle right, and also you get boost from doing it. So it's sort of it was one of those sort of mechanics that you had to get right, and it was quite addictive when you did get into a nice flow. Having said that, it's a very challenging game, but you get your boost, and then you can use it on the straights or around the bends, depending on what your preference was. And it was just one of those games that sort of come out of nowhere. It's very interesting to play. Visually, it looks stunning in VR. Initially you get onto the track and you can look around you, you can look around at the track. And it's not one of those games where you see everything in immediately in front of you. You have to tilt your head to see certain parts of the track. So you have your car whizzing along, doing slides around turns, and you're looking at it as it gets closer to you or further away from you, depending on where you are on the track. And it just had this lovely, colourful, fun, vibrant environment feel to it. You had a number of environments. You had stuff that goes underwater. There was one environment that you had a skeleton in a treasure sort of cave, and he was holding up part of the track. So in terms of design, fantastic level design. It really was a standout for last year, and a fun game, but it was very challenging at launch. They sort of got the difficulty a little bit wrong, and since have patched the game, so it's much more accessible, I guess, if you like. But still has a challenging element that's is very satisfying. But it's one of those games you have to put a lot of time into to get it right. But when you did, it certainly was a satisfying game, and a lot of fun, very colourful environments, like I've said, nice vehicle choices, and it just sort of come out of nowhere, and it surprised me, and was one of the better sort of PSVR racing games out there.
Yeah, I mean, it was one that sort of went a bit under the radar.
Yeah.
I felt that it didn't really get exposure it could have. I mean, one thing we did intend to do was a multiplayer session, which we haven't got around to doing yet, but that's meant to be quite fun. And of course, following your review, of course, they did listen to what you wrote in the review and amended the game in terms of difficulty. So, I mean, that was a good response from the developers in that sense. Yeah. It's one of those games that it looks so nice. You just kind of wish it had more exposure. You wish more people could test it on a PSVR in that sense. So few people have got PSVR. But it was certainly an interesting one there. Next one, again, and Kevin, you're the man on this one. We've got Baja Edge of Control. Now, this was made by, was it Blitworks is the company behind this? Several developers, actually, and TQ Global PTE Limited. So the publishers you'll know well in terms of THQ and THQ Nordic, but the developers are actually quite small.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I've never been a big fan of Baja Edge of Control. Perhaps it takes a bit of time to get into, but Kevin, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the HD remaster is a very sort of simplistic job. It just basically upgraded the textures and the sort of technical performance. Now, if you'd played the game on a PS3 in particular, technically the original game was very poor around certain environments. You know, the frame rate was very
remember
shocking.
that.
Yeah,
It's
so
grinded to a halt, literally.
it's a sort of game that if you was a fan of the original, that you know, perhaps you had it on console and it didn't perform very well, this would be the game for you. But you know, it's just a shame they've only upgraded the performance and the texture, because the menus, the sound effects, everything else is just a copy and paste job basically. So it reminds me a little bit of the more recent remaster. We have, you know, Burnout Paradise remaster, where they've just sort of seemed to have done the basics and not really gone beyond that, which is a bit of a shame, really.
It's an unusual choice as well for a remaster. It's not really a game that
and
was probably high in demand on the list of games.
but considering what a minimal job that they've done, I guess, you know, it's something they've just sort of knocked out. So that's probably why they didn't want to spend too much time and resources on it, and I guess that's understandable.
Yeah, I mean, either way, I mean, I think the thing is, it's got a big following, and you know, it is just very competitive, isn't it? I mean, as an HD remaster, it's a bit cheeky. It's sneaking in there in that sense, but it does have its fan base. It does have its following. And in some respects, I suppose if you do get into it, there is a good game in there to sort of discover in that way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's getting past that first sort of hour or so of gameplay, and then it really sort of speeds up in the career mode. And you can play this game with a wheel as well. So they've introduced a patch that you can play with a wheel and actually change view. Whereas initially you couldn't actually do that. You couldn't change view. You were stuck to the chase cam. But when you get stuck into the faster vehicles, it is a fun game, and it was a lot of fun to play. But yeah, well, I just would have liked to have seen a little bit more in terms of bringing it to more modern standards.
Yeah, definitely. There was definitely room for improvement there. So moving on to the next one now, which is Urban Trial Freestyle 2. And I think Ed was predominantly playing this at the time. Again, it's very much sort of Trials HD in terms of the look and feel of it. Kevin, what do you think of this?
Yeah, like you say, it's very much like a Trials inspired game, isn't it? Where you have like a 3D environment, but you control a bike, over jumps and such on a sort of 2D plane. So, it very much is a sort of heavily inspired by the Trials game, which is not a bad thing. You know, it does introduce a custom track editor. You can sort of create and share your own design. So in that respect, it's it does introduce something new to the table. And there's like a stunt mode as well, where you sort of gain stars. So it does have one or two things going for it. But overall, I think it's not quite up to the sort of Trials standards if you sort of dismiss the more recent Blood Dragon game.
Absolutely. Martin, any thoughts?
I think it's a bit of a shame, really. It was a 3DS exclusive. I believe the first one was released on all formats at the time. It was PS3, PC. But it seems to now be a Nintendo exclusive franchise, because there's actually a sequel coming out for it on the Nintendo Switch quite shortly. Yep. But I guess on 3DS there's not many similar games in that genre available, so I think it does fill a void there. But yeah, it's just going to be a little bit more substantial as a package, I guess. But it's good to see that they are expanding to the Switch. I think they will find a pretty big audience on there, because I imagine there's a lot of demand for that, because apart from obviously MXGP and Monster Energy, which are very subpar ports, I should add, there's not really much choice for bike racers at the moment. And absolutely no sort of side-scrolling Trials style games on the system. So I imagine it probably went under a lot of people's radars, Urban Trial Freestyle 2. But we'll see what happens with the sequel. Hopefully we'll be able to get our hands on with that soon.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, like you say, it's going to find a far bigger audience now, and I think it's a game that really does deserve a bigger audience and has the potential there. Talking of that, we're moving on now to another Switch title here, Mantis Burn Racing on Nintendo Switch. We enjoyed it a lot on the console versions, but Kevin, tell me Martin, you've been playing it quite a bit on the Switch, haven't you? Tell me your thoughts about Mantis Burn Racing on the Switch.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it. So Mantis Burn Racing came out a couple of years back on PC. It was then ported over to the consoles, PS4 and Xbox One. And of course, it's been released on Switch as well. So I'm really pleased to see that it's finding a new audience, and it's been well received so far. I think Mantis Burn really revitalized the top-down racing genre. This, of course, was a genre really popularized by Micro Machines, but I have to say, Mantis Burn, I think, is a much better game than even Micro Machines World Series.
Yes.
It certainly has a more substantial career mode for a start. Very, very extensive career mode, lots of customization and upgrades. There's a lot to keep you playing there. I mean, this game was even nominated actually last year in our Best Indie Award for the previous release. But like we said at the time, just it's so much fun just to play and just enjoy sliding around the corners. Because
that's right. I mean, playing through the career modes, I found that I wanted to sort of complete all the objectives. You get the cogs, the gear cogs, and usually you in other games you might grind them out to progress, but in Mantis Burn, I just felt like I wanted to actually achieve these sort of side objectives during the events because it was so compelling to play, wasn't it?
It's a great handling model. It's got that perfect balance of pick up and play accessibility, but there's still quite a bit of skill involved, especially with the faster cars.
Yeah.
For me, the only thing that really lets it down is the limited environment selection. Unfortunately, I mean the Switch version does add all the updates that have come out since, so you get a new snow environment, but there's still only 3 environments, and it does get a bit repetitive sometimes. A lot of the tracks do start to look the same sometimes in this limited selection of environments, but other than that, it's a really solid top-down racer and great fun, and it really suits the Switch platform as well.
Absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head there in terms of limited environments. This is something I highlighted with the initial release. I quite like the rocky canyons. I thought they looked great.
Yeah, graphically it looks amazing. Yeah,
I remember it being a bit dark in the caves, and I couldn't see where I was going sometimes. But I wasn't so sold on the city and urban environments. They had sort of green look. They looked a bit lifeless and sterile, and they didn't have an atmosphere about them. They didn't have enough detail to them, and I felt the game really needed a few more environments to reach its potential. So it seems like a lot of investment went into the sort of rocky environments, and then it was just a case of quickly piecing together the city environments. Thing is, when you're making games like this, developers are quite cunning in the way they will build a building and then they'll lie that building down sideways and they'll stand it up and they'll turn it upside down and so on, and they can use that same piece several times. And I can see sometimes where you can do something like that with a city circuit. So environments there. I think on the Switch, I mean, this is about Switch release. It's a perfect game for the Switch. It works so well, and we're going to talk more about this in the handheld as well. There's a lot of detail there. And when I think last year, of course, it was between Mantis Burn and Tabletop Racing last year. And again, here it's a sort of big challenge for me between Mantis Burn Racing and Redout in terms of you've got 2 games here of high quality, really high quality. Actually, I think Tiny Tracks actually deserves a special mention. And it's very difficult sort of when you get to this stage and you have to pick a winner, because both of them, you can see how hard the developers have worked to bring and polish elements and bring them together. But I guess now it's decision time. Martin, give me your thoughts on the best indie game.
I think it has to go to Redout overall, just for its originality. It really innovates the futuristic genre. They're really supporting it well as well. We have responded to community feedback. It's a really, really good alternative to Wipeout. Mantis Burn Racing, like I said before, really fun, solid top-down racer, just let down by that limited environment selection. If it wasn't for that, it could well have won. But hopefully we'll see more support down the line from VVV Studios.
Yeah, Kevin, your thoughts?
It's a tough one, isn't it? I mean, Mantis Burn I enjoy tremendously, but like you say, it has limited environments. Tiny Tracks, another very enjoyable game, and in this case, it has wonderful environments. Beautiful to look at in the VR modes, and some fantastic level design, certainly in Tiny Tracks. But for me, I think overall, I probably just have to give it to Redout, just by a hair, because it is bringing something really new to a sort of genre that's had quite a few, it's been around for quite a few years now. But so to add something new to a genre like that, introduce a new control element, I think is sort of worthy of making it the best indie game for 2018 awards.
Sure. Well, I mean, we've got, again, like you say, Mantis Burn, it's a really solid experience. It's fantastic on the Switch. I think Tiny Tracks on PSVR, breaking new ground and innovation with good tech as well. But I think where Redout Lightspeed editions come together is, when I first reviewed it, the original version a couple of years ago, I said it didn't have enough locations. That was the thing, one of the things that let it down. I felt I was racing in the same location over and over again. since then they've brought in these new locations: deep space, the moon, Mars, Neptune, you know, underwater levels, Europa. You've got zany levels, I can't even remember where they are, floating on boxes and stuff like that. It's really like crazy now in terms of some of the design and the circuits and the way they work. It excites me when I drive them, and in the scale of the project and the amount of support, it's brilliant. You know, my feelings are that Redout is far superior to the new Wipeout Omega, which was very disappointing last year. I didn't like the handling on it at all, and in a way I kind of feel it was damaging for the Wipeout brand in that sense, because it really doesn't have the control and the essence of what made Wipeout great. Redout kind of pitches itself between F-Zero and Wipeout, and it does it as good as them and really deserves that respect. And in that sense, it's a clear winner for me in the 2018 awards. So the winner of the 2018 Best Indie Game Award is Redout's Lightspeed Edition. And congratulations to 34 Big Things for all the work they've done. And we expect big things in the future as well, because they're going to keep on working and developing on that in terms of what they're looking forward to. So that's great. And that's it for this award, viewers. Best Indie Game. Lots more to look forward to this week. It's the big week of big game awards, and there's going to be a lot to discuss. But that's it from me and the guys, and there'll be more from us very soon. The Team VVV Awards 2018, sponsored by Ben Green Racing and Thrustmaster.